very much. Sir Stephen Timms.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'm very pleased that the bill is in front of us. It's been very clear in the Select Committee in the last few weeks that without a big measure on this kind of scale, low-income families would be in very serious trouble indeed in the coming months. I echo the tribute that's just been paid by the Honourable Member for Aberdeen North to Jack Munro and her campaigning on this, and she gave very compelling evidence to the Select Committee at our meeting on the 9th of March. And the package that's come forward has been widely welcomed. We put out a call for evidence on the cost of living in May. In response, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation said that, and I quote, "The package provided much needed support for households which will protect many of them against rising costs over the coming year." Citizens Advice welcomed the targeted support to low-income households and hoped it would, quote, "start to reverse the worrying trends we've seen in our data, including record-breaking food bank referrals." Unlike the previous announcements, this May package is properly targeted on low-income families, as it needed to be. The Resolution Foundation described it as offsetting, quote, "the poor targeting of previous announcements," and also described it as serious redistribution. It is, I think, a serious response to a serious problem, and I also welcome the Chancellor's change of heart over the windfall tax to fund some of the help that's needed. But, Mr Deputy Speaker, we do need to be clear. The reason this bill is needed is because the system for social security uprating has failed. It's a long-standing system. There's nothing new about the way it's done, but the unforeseen burst in inflation means that it simply has not worked this year. And on this occasion, the decision has been taken to replace adequate uprating with ad hoc payments from the Treasury. And that will certainly help us through the next few months. But we need now, I think, to rethink the uprating system to make sure that it doesn't let us down again. The Secretary of State... I'm glad to give way to my old friend.
Select Committee Chair, a question. Is he aware that, I think in 1976, the then Social Services Secretary, Barbara Castle, came to the House and uprated benefits and the pension for a second time in the year because of the cost of living crisis then? And actually the policy of the then Shadow Frontbench, Shadow Secretary of State Norman Fowler, was that uprating should take place twice a year. And I wonder if the Select Committee may well consider the arguments that were made in the 1970s.
Well, I think the Honourable Gentleman makes a very important point, and the Select Committee will indeed certainly be looking at that. We are conducting an inquiry later this year on the question of the level of benefits, and these issues about how benefits should be uprated will certainly feature. I'm intrigued to learn that the Secretary of State in the 1970s was able to do that, given that we've been told that the IT systems in the 2020s can't cope with it. So we'll certainly be interested to pursue that further. Yes, I'll gladly give way.
Grateful to the Right Honourable Member, the Chairman of the Select Committee, for giving way. And this is a really interesting and important point about how we do up ratings. I would urge the Right Honourable Member not to get drawn too far down the path of looking at the system in the 70s. You're talking about very, very different circumstances. There is an issue about the timing of uprating and what figures you are using to calculate. But the bigger issue, the practical issue, I believe, is around the different IT systems, that we still have a plethora of different benefits in play. Does he agree with me that we need to find a way of rationalising that and simplifying that?
I think that would help. I mean, just modernising the old systems would also help, and I do want to say something about that in a moment. But what we're getting is ad hoc payments from the Treasury to sort of tide us over. The Secretary of State has spelt out to the Select Committee, I think rightly, the downsides of one-off ad hoc payments like those that this legislation is enabling. In oral evidence in February last year, she told the committee that there were higher risks of fraud attached to one-off payments and that they can make it difficult for claimants to budget effectively, and both of which I think are quite telling points. She said that one-off payments were not, quote, not one of the department's preferred approaches on providing that financial support. She noted that, quote, there are some challenges about fraud and that there would also be difficulties if people claiming tax credits received a one-off payment and then moved to universal credit shortly afterwards. On the question of what might work best for claimants, she told us that, quote, previous experience would be that a steady sum of money would probably be more beneficial to claimants and customers to help with that budgeting process. And I think she's right. It's not ideal that we've instead got these lump sums being provided by the Treasury. Now, why wasn't proper uprating done in this case? Well, the Chancellor, and this comes to the point that we've just been talking about, the Chancellor pointed out that the fact that legacy benefits are run on antiquated IT systems means that benefits cannot be quickly uprated, the legacy benefits, that is. It takes several months. And he told us that was why he was unwilling simply to uprate benefits. It could have been done very quickly for universal credit, as we discovered in the pandemic, but not for the legacy benefits. Now, in an earlier debate, the Shadow Secretary of State, I recall, brandishing a document from an IT company. I think maybe it was Oracle, the company that provided that document, about the front end that they built for the department's legacy systems, which it was said enabled changes to be made to them much more quickly. And I do wonder whether the Minister, in closing this debate, could tell us what was the truth behind that claim about the front ends that had been provided. I know such front ends certainly have been commissioned by the department over quite a long time, front ends to legacy systems. And so I would just be interested to know why, notwithstanding what that brandished document said, why it is apparently still the case that uprating takes 4 or 5 months. Are there front ends in place? Why have they not made, apparently, faster changes possible? In our report in June 2020 on the department's response to coronavirus, the Select Committee recommended an increase in the speed with which changes could be made to legacy benefits. We said this, quote, people will be claiming legacy benefits until at least September 2024, the government's most recent estimate for completing the rollout of universal credit. It is simply not tenable for the department to continue to operate antiquated systems that prevent ministers from making timely changes to the rates at which legacy benefits are paid. We recommend that the department work to increase the speed with which changes can be made to legacy benefit rates. In its response in October of that year, the department said, quote, it recognises the need to be able to respond to events flexibly, which is why we're investing in universal credit, which is more agile than the systems that support legacy benefits, end quote. But while substantial numbers are depending on legacy benefits, the government surely needs to keep the systems that support those benefits fit for purpose. They are clearly not fit for purpose at the moment, and that ought to be addressed. Yes, I'm glad to give way.
On that note, the new systems that we've created in Scotland under Social Security Scotland are doing exactly as he is asking, and they have got that ability to make those extra payments because we have set up the systems. Does he think that they just need to put some investment in order to sort this for so many thousands of people?
It certainly does need to be done, and I'm pleased to be able to tell the Honourable Lady that the Select Committee will be visiting Social Security Scotland on Monday, and the Vice Chair, who's in his place today, will be part of that group, and we're looking forward to that visit. The reason benefit uprating hasn't worked this year, of course, is the 6-month gap between September, the inflation figure for which forms the basis for uprating the following year, and April, when the increases take effect. In evidence to our call for evidence on the cost of living, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation called on the government to, quote, commit to a much shorter time frame for annual uprating between measuring inflation and uprating accordingly to ensure benefit uprating genuinely reflects inflation for the year in question. Lloyds Bank Foundation told us, quote, government should consider uprating benefits in line with inflation in the autumn to ensure they more accurately reflect the true cost of living. That sounds perhaps what was being done in the 1970s. The Legatum Institute also suggested reducing the delay between CPI measurement and application of uprating and introducing a mid-year uprating review. Citizens' Advice called for a more sustainable, responsive uprating approach, which means, quote, addressing the lag between benefit uprating decision-making and implementation, and the exclusion of the benefit cap from wider uprating. It says that while the one-off payments to be made under the bill are more generous for some households than if uprating had been brought forward, there are problems. For example, as we've been reminded, the one-off payments are the same amount regardless of family size, a point made by my honourable friend, the Shadow Secretary of State. And they also have cut-off dates which risk arbitrarily excluding people from support. This point about flat rate payments being irrespective of family size does appear pretty unfair to larger families. Overall, the package, I think, is somewhat more generous than early benefit uprating would have been, but for larger families it is less generous, and it's not clear what the justification for that is. The North East Child Poverty Committee told us, and I quote, a flat rate £650 payment for all households on means tested benefits, regardless of household size, additionally fails to recognise the clear link between family size and essential outgoings, with many larger families already at much greater risk of poverty, a situation compounded by the two-child limit, facing intolerable financial pressures as a result of rising household bills. And I just, Mr Deputy Speaker, I want to make one final point. One great advantage of the Chancellor's package for low-income families, compared with a straightforward benefit uprating, and I was grateful to the Secretary of State for confirming that this is the case, is that the benefit cap doesn't apply. It is a very striking thing that when it appears that the headline rate of social security benefits is likely to be raised by 10% plus perhaps next year, there is no indication at all at the moment that the benefit cap is going to be lifted at all. That means that the growing number of families whose benefit has been capped will receive no increase in their income at all at a time when inflation is likely to be over 10%. In its evidence to the Select Committee, the Child Poverty Action Group told us, I quote, the government has made a welcome commitment to increase benefits in April 2023 in line with prices. However, not all price-related elements of the system are included in the annual uprating exercise, and the benefit cap means a substantial minority of claimants, an estimated 150,000, will see no increase at all and face another real terms cut to their benefit. At a time, Mr Deputy Speaker, when inflation is so high, the level at least of the benefit cap must surely be reviewed. And I wonder if the Minister, in closing, can give us any encouragement that it will be ahead of April next year. For now, though, Mr Deputy Speaker, and in the context of this bill, it is welcome, I think, and also quite a significant precedent that the benefit cap will not apply to these additional payments, and I welcome that.